Welcome back for another episode of Coffee with Kareem. The topic on my heart today is really just wanting to talk to you all about what the assets are, right? What the unique, leverageable qualities and things you bring to the table are when you grow up with nothing. Oftentimes, I get folks who come up to me and they're like, Kareem, how did you do it? How did you start a business with no friends or family capital to start in the very beginning? How is it possible? What were the things that allowed you to do it? And I think we oftentimes are always focused on the things that we don't have. We can find ourselves caught up in what is missing. And I think one of the pieces that might be missing is just a shift in your perspective. So regardless of where you are, what position you're at in your life, you're going to have strengths, you're going to have weaknesses, you're going to have things that are going for you and things that are working against you. And I think it's important that regardless of where you are, that you're able to see both sides. In education, we have this term called deficit thinking or having a deficit mindset, which is where we focus on the things that we don't have instead of focusing on the things that we do have. In order to be successful, you need to understand your weaknesses and you also have to understand your strengths. And so this episode, I really wanted to talk to you all about what are those strengths. So you might be sitting there and saying, well, I don't know what those strengths are, right? I've never been in a position where I've worked for a corporation. I've never been in a position where I've been a leader to understand what those things might be. And it took me a while to recognize them too. So it wasn't like I'm sitting here and telling you all, I knew at the beginning of my journey that all of these experiences that I had as a child were going to serve me later on. In fact, I had mentors, I had coaches and other people all around me who helped me see the assets that were around me the entire time. And then some of them came from pure experience, being in a position or a situation that I didn't want to be in, fighting my way through it. So let's start with one of them because I kind of alluded to it. When you grow up with nothing, right, and you come from very little, you are very scrappy. So scrappiness is something that is a skill, it is a resource, and it is an asset whenever you're starting a business or you're working for a company or an organization, wherever you are, right? Those times where you clipped coupons, maybe where you didn't have things that you would have wanted that would have made your life easier, you had to come up with a different way to do it. And so in line with that is this creativity that comes with not having a lot of resources. And the example I'll give you all is something I struggle with my whole life has been these night sweats that I get, especially when it's really hot at night. I love to sleep with a blanket. Just having a blanket on is comforting. It gives me a sense of security, even if it's hot. And there were a few summers in my early teenage years where we couldn't afford air conditioning, not the electricity or the actual air conditioner. And so I would have a really hard time staying asleep. I would go to bed and before I knew it, I was like breaking out in sweats and I'd be up all night just rolling around in bed because it was too hot to fall asleep. I knew asking for an air conditioner was out of the question. And so I started to think of like what other ways I might be able to solve my problem. And coincidentally at the time, I was playing football. I was on the high school football team and Under Armour had created this gear. I think it was called heat gear. And the heat gear was supposed to help you in the summertime stay cool. And basically what it did was it would take the sweat that was running through your body in this like heat gear, sort of make you feel a little bit cooler. So I started trying to sleep with that. Only problem with the heat gear was it was keeping the sweat in. There was nothing to actually cool the sweat. When you had it on and you were running and you get that breeze or that air or you're outdoors, it makes a difference. When you're inside an apartment or in a bedroom, there was no air. So what I did was I combined that with the fan. And so at night, as I was sweating, the sweat would then run in, it would get caught up in this heat gear technology. And then with the breeze, it would make it feel cooler. And that solved my problem. And I share this with you all to say that I created a low cost air conditioner, but I did it out of necessity. And so one of the assets that you have when you're growing up with very little is this forced creativity. And the more you flex that muscle, the more you use your creativity, the better, the stronger, and everything else that it gets. And so when you're growing up in an environment where you have very little, not only are you scrappy, but you're forced to be more creative. Another thing you have going for you is you are used to setbacks and failures and having plans that don't actually go as the way you thought they were going to go, or having resources kind of get in the way of them, whether it's a trip to go and see a family member or something that you've been saving up to purchase. I remember as a kid, I would have this goal to save up money to go and buy myself a new pair of sneakers. And then in the process of saving up to get those new pair of sneakers, my phone would break. And all of a sudden, the money that I'd been saving up for months trying to buy a new pair of sneakers, I was using to buy a phone. So you're used to dealing with life's ups upsets and blowbacks. And the most important thing is you've bounced back from them. So you have the comfort and the ability that a lot of people take years to develop, but you have ingrained in you this natural tendency to continue to bounce back and move forward. And so that is another asset, that is a strength that you have. You understand that things pop up and they happen, and you're just going to keep moving forward anyway. You're resilient. You continue to push back and push forward. So I think that is another asset that you have going for you. And that is one to also keep in mind. And then expectation. I remember being in college and getting ready to graduate and struggling or grappling with this idea of, do I go and take a full-time offer, or do I go and run this education company full-time? Which of the two things do I do? And when I was a student, I realized this the most. I was running the organization as I was in school, and there were times that were really challenging. We'd have step backs and things weren't going the way I wanted them to. All of a sudden, I remember having a conversation with a mentor when it dawned on me that the only expectation that was put on me when I was a student was that I was a student. And I took that then and paralleled it to when you're growing up with nothing and you have very little, the expectation typically also isn't very high. And so the higher expectations are going to be put on by you. They're not going to be dictated by your environment. You have the opportunity to do that. And so I say that because I want you to take more risk, right? When you have no expectation, or people don't expect you to be successful because you're growing up in poverty, or you don't have resources, or what you're going to do is defy the odds, they also don't have a lot of expectation that comes with that. And that expectation in some ways can be freeing. On the other side of that, when you have a lot of resources, when people put a lot of money into what you're doing, the expectation is that it's going to be successful. And sometimes the burden of that expectation can set you up for failure. And so you may not even have noticed it, but you have an asset right away, knowing that there is no pressure and there's no expectation. You can go out there and fail, and keep learning from each failure until you're successful. And so one of the other assets you have going for you is this lack of expectation, where the only expectation being the expectation that you set. And then the last asset I'll give you that I've seen just time and time again, working with so many students, working with so many kids who are growing up in neighborhoods just like I did, is that the inner city, or growing up with very little, gives you this confidence that is really hard to develop in kids in general and in adults even to this day. You have this confidence that either everything is going to work out, or that you're tough, or that you believe in yourself. Maybe it's the grit that is like formed from the environment that we grew up in, but that confidence is a really big asset. And it may not be internal confidence, it may just be external confidence, because you know you have to portray it or show it so other people don't mess with you, that they stay away from you, or that they can believe that you can handle your own. And so whether or not it's true or real, you have this ability to project confidence externally, which goes a really long way, regardless of whether you're using that in starting your own business and getting other people to believe in your ideas, or to present, speak to a group of people, in whichever case it is. That confidence is a really big strength that is really hard to develop later on in life. So those are the assets that come with growing up with nothing. And I just wanted to share them with you all because I wanted you to see them next time you're going to start a new venture, or you're walking to the table to discuss something with a new partner, or you're building a friendship or a relationship, that regardless of your circumstance, that you have something that you can bring to the table. We all have something that we can bring to the table, regardless of our socioeconomic status or where we're at. We have something that we can bring to the table. And so I just want you to see those assets. I want you to do something with them. And I want you to know that you shouldn't just be focusing on the things that you don't have, because you have just as many things that you could be focusing on that you can contribute, whether they're experience or perspective. So with that, I challenge you all to go out there and get after it.